Good afternoon. It's my incredible honor and pleasure to welcome you all today. My name is Simha Sadasiva. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ushur. With me here is Global CIO and Executive Vice President of Great West, Steve Rulo. Jennifer Daniels is the Vice President for Acquisition and Broker Strategy at Aflac. And Jason Andrews is a Chief Global Alliance Officer at Phineas. So it's an honor to welcome them to share this afternoon, and there's a wealth of experience here on this panel. I have a few prepped up questions here, pre-prepared, but I think to make this work for you, it would be awesome if you guys want to participate in this. You can ask us a question through the app, or you can just raise your hand, and we can have them bring you a microphone, and you can ask us. The goal is for us to, share everything that we have done in the industry and help you understand what are the motions that we are experiencing here. Well, it's my pleasure. Welcome. Steve, do you want to just introduce yourself and speak a few words about your role? What are the things that you're doing? But first question, right after you introduce yourself, would be, what is the digital transformation initiatives that are prime for you as a company? What does customer experience really mean? And how are you looking at the whole landscape of transformation?
Great, thanks, Sima, and happy to be here. As Sima mentioned, Steve Rulo, Global CIO for Great West Life. We are a financial services holding company with brands in Canada, Europe, and the US, primarily in life, group, that includes health and annuities, and also the retirement services industry in the US and wealth management. So I'm relatively new to the company. I've been there about 6 months after 20 years at the General Electric company in the G Capital business. And in terms of our digital initiatives around customer experience, it's really looking at all the different touch points with our customers. It's not just the online traditional applications, either on a mobile device or on the web, but also everything from call to text to email. And how do we make the response time, the experience on that more seamless and timely? And so we take a multi-pronged approach to that. I think some of our biggest challenges, a lot of our back-end systems are still those legacy systems. And so our challenge is, how do you digitize the front-end experience while you modernize your back office systems, which, as many of you probably know, takes several years to get accomplished, and a lot of fortitude to stay on track.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic to dive deep into, right? Most of the time, when we talk about digital transformation, these are multi-year journeys. You don't see any results for 3, 4, 5 years, and you have sunk $40-50 million of. So how do you think about making investments? What does investment committee look for when you're pitching and when you're presenting new ideas?
Well, I think it's a balance. You've got to look at how much are you spending on modernization, but then while you wait for that, how much are you spending on decoupling some of that capability to the digital experience on the front end, and you can't wait. So you've got to spend on that. You've got to spend on the regulatory and cybersecurity and governance aspects, and you've got to spend on data. And so you can't do any one of those entirely when you look at your investment portfolio. So it's kind of like your own financial investment portfolio. You got to diversify. And it's very similar as a leadership team in a company like ours to understand where you need to make those trade-offs and try to make progress towards an end goal that's going to be multi-year, but start to show results in year one, year two. And the only way you can do that is to spread that investment.
And I'm jumping in, so I hope that's
Please.
okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's going to be your show. I think the investment piece is obviously hugely important, and it drives a lot of the decisions. But working at Aflac, working with legacy systems, working with a company that's been around a really long time, I think being able to partner with startups and these tech companies that can do things faster, quicker, more nimbly, if that's a word, then we can do it. And so there's things that we're going to have to your point, go slow. But if we can partner with people who can go fast, that's going to get us where we need to be a lot quicker.
So speaking of which, great segue to talk about the acquisition and the broker world, right? So the whole experience or need to own the customer is something that's top of mind for a lot of insurance companies, as I'm realizing, right? So they don't want to delegate that responsibility of acquisition through third parties, right? So how are you seeing the world transform or change? What does broker relationships mean to you? Are they evolving, changing? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the broker space is hugely important. I mean, that's how we sell our group business, is strictly through brokers. So we're not only, and we kind of see our client as both the end, so there's three levels, right? We've got the broker client, you have the employer client, and then the employee client. And they all have different needs, and we're treating them all a little bit differently, but all with a little bit of a digital focus. And so the brokers, what we're finding is they have to specialize. They have to find ways to differentiate with their clients, and they need to become experts. And what do they need to become experts in is technology. So how can we as a carrier enable, educate, give them some tools that make them stand out to their clients, thus enabling them from a digital perspective, but also tying them back to us?
That's a great perspective, right? So when we talk about customers, they are across the spectrum. So for you, your customers are brokers, right? So you are servicing the brokers. So what are the transformations that you are looking at from a platform perspective, from enabling them to learn more about the products? How are you thinking about that? What is evolving from your world?
So when we're talking to our sales team, the first thing we're telling them is stop talking about product and start talking about technology, because we know that 90% of our clients and our brokers are coming to us, they're already on a platform. And so if we don't fit our products to their platform, we're out. It doesn't matter. And so helping the brokers understand what fits, what doesn't fit, to make that a seamless experience. Because as it goes toward the way of Amazon and people want this one-touch solution and employees want a quick enrollment, you have to have products that fit technology. So we're very focused on simplifying, reducing number of fields, and making that experience easier, because if the broker recommends us and they recommend that platform, it's their reputation on the line, and we want to make them look good.
So Jason, a good segue is to talk about what Jen started with, the Amazon experience. So how are you thinking about the customer experience, the Amazon experience, alongside a platform like Phineas? As co-founder and CEO, congratulations on the transaction last year. Tell us a little bit about your new role and also what you're doing from a roadmap perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great conversation. And one of the things that I like to think about, I've been in the employee benefits industry for the last 20 years and, got into it because I really liked working with people. And I think a lot of us that end up getting in this space, that's really the driver. And so Jen talks about, brokers. I was a broker for many years, then started a technology company, then got acquired, and now work for a global core system provider. And at the end of the day, I think about it, it is the software and it is the experience. But ultimately, if any of us stop to take a second and think about when this stuff really matters, it's when one of your kids or somebody in your family is in the ER and they have a claim, or somebody tells them that their deductible hasn't been maxed out, or they don't know what the coverage is, and they call it's the people part of this to me, which is the super important piece. Or somebody goes out on leave for disability, and so in their state and their county, what is the right coverage that they should have for those pieces. And so really at the end of the day, it's about creating an experience that takes care of people. And I think one of the things for us as we were building it, starting with the broker perspective, because that's what I had done, and we had to sit at the feet of lots of business owners and their employees who were in those experiences, or someone passes away. And I think that the technology should all be, the experiences we're building should revolve around that, ultimately. And so at Fineos, one of the things that we were really excited about as a younger insurtech company that had built a new business underwriting system was looking for a partner that shared those same values and really was driven by that. And so, Fineos's vision is really a world where, protection from injury, illness, and loss is accessible to everybody, which is kind of a cool vision to get behind, right? Like, who doesn't want to have coverage from protection, loss, and illness, right? And I think that can get lost sometimes in the conversation. And the challenge is we have a lot of legacy software. We have lots of new software that's coming in, and it's not an easy thing to solve because it's a very, very complex industry. But I think that's what gets me excited about it is how do we build those things that really matter when it matters.
Yeah, just for the benefit of the audience, I think we may be a little bit close to this. Jason was the co-founder and CEO of Limelight Health. They were acquired by Fineos last summer.
Yeah.
And so, again, congratulations.
I can't believe you're not asking him about his outfit.
Thank you. Okay.
Go ahead, ask.
So I've been at every conference of ITC since the beginning. So I think there's like 750 people. Someone can correct me if that's wrong. The first one has grown steadily, and a bunch of the startups were like on the circuit working together, trying to grow. And my wife came with the idea to wear these like lime green shoes because we were Limelight Health, right? And so every conference I went to for several years, I just said, hey, look for the guy with the green shoes. It worked. It was brilliant. My wife was smart. And so, but now we got acquired. I couldn't do that. But the cool theme was that we got acquired by a company out of Dublin, of deep Gaelic roots. I'm 50% Scottish. We made our second acquisition of a company named Spree, which does AI and machine learning. And the name of Spree in Gaelic is fun. So I was like, I'm wearing a kilt to the ITC conference. Like, it's no brainer. Plus, my wife has Oregon Ducks tickets. And so we've been going to every game. And now I'm the guy in the green kilt at the stadium. So.
And now you're realizing why we don't wear skirts on stage.
Yeah, no, I was trying to figure that out the whole time. Like, oh wow, how do I do this? And I'm like, sitting here like this.
Let's talk a little bit about some technology. There's a lot of hype and hoopla about AI and machine learning, right? What are you finding, Steve, in all of the work that you've done at GE as well as what you're looking at now? How much of that hype is reality? What kinds of problems are you solving or trying to solve?
Look, I think there's definitely a reality to some of the use cases that could deliver a significant amount of value. I think the challenge is everyone's describing their capability as AI, and the way I think about it is if you can automate a process or an activity if it's repetitive, and you can predetermine the steps. When you have to make a cognitive decision, then you need intelligence. And so to the degree that you can digitize that, I think of AI that way. And so we're seeing some good results in use cases around better decision making. In our risk area, we've written some tools to continuously look for anomalies in claim submissions. On the health side, even using geographical, data points to understand networks and the correlations there. And we think we've, avoided quite a bit of fraud that way already in some early results. And then on automation of activity, which again requires some interpretation, and we've partnered with companies like Ushur to, like I said earlier, look at a number of different touch points with customers, and how do we respond quickly? So you send an email for some information, and that information could be asking for something about a particular claim or policy. And you can interpret that with AI and recognize that there isn't, you couple it with OCR, there isn't a policy number in there, an invoice number. And before any human looks at it, you can respond to it and say, thank you for your email. We notice you haven't given us a policy number. Can you, versus that sitting in somebody's queue for 3 days, and then someone emailing them back, and that just delays the time even more. And so that type of seamless experience is enabled in that immediate response time with AI. And there's a lot of other cases like that that we're exploring. But similar to what Jennifer said, we don't always have the expertise, nor the nimbleness, nor the investment to go build that ourselves. So we're partnering with companies to bring those to light.
And I think it's just going to continue to grow. We touched on a little bit yesterday in our Group Connect session, but my personal opinion is the future of insurance is not in our products, definitely not on the health side. Critical illness, take 5 different carriers, our CI products, about the same. Where do we differentiate? It's experience. And how do we get to that experience? It's AI, machine learning. It's simplifying that process. It's meeting those consumers or the brokers where they want to be met and giving them the easiest solution possible. So that's how we're going to differentiate. That's how we're going to change this industry, is through the experience of these products. I mean, the products are still obviously important and we'll continue to innovate there, but I think the experience piece is where we're going to see the biggest potential.
Yeah, so speed and experience. So those are 2 terms that I'm hearing all of the acquisition.
Speed and ease of use. Yeah,
speed and ease of use, right? So does close ratios get impacted when you're faster, when you try to underwrite or get a quote?
100%. Speed kills all deals. Lack of speed. I mean, in terms of like when someone's trying to, from the broker's perspective, time, kills all deals, not speed. But right, that's one of the challenges. I like what Steve had said in terms of being really specific on the use cases, and similar. That's one of the things we're working on. And there's a report that I saw years ago that I've quoted many times that says that 40% of an insurer's cost of doing business comes down to 25 manual processes. And the challenge is working through each of those manual processes. Unfortunately, it takes a long time, but very methodically. So you take and say, okay, well, what's one of the killers of that? Well, right now, every broker in the country during the open enrollment season is sending a census via email to a carrier who then hires a whole boatload of people that are manually in some warehouse someplace processing those, sitting in the queues for 3 days. And so you go, well, can you just automate the census intake and just get really good at that one piece? And it's is that going to provide a substantial return on investment? Probably, right? And so can you automate that piece and work on it and do that successfully? And maybe you do it for one line or one block of business or just new business. And then you do the same thing and you kind of work your way through disability and through absence and through claims, and you start chunking away at those manual processes. But I think a lot of times both carriers and vendors try and tackle the whole thing, and it just becomes this, really difficult beast to bring down. And so I love that idea of kind of taking very specific use cases.
Can I share an interesting statistic I learned? So in modern industries like e-commerce, think about eBay, Amazon, any digital e-commerce business, roughly about 100 FTEs, right, full-time headcount is required to service roughly about $1 billion of revenue for the company. But in the world of insurance, healthcare, maybe even some financial services, take a guess what that number is. Anybody?
Of FTE for the same revenue? 1,000?
Close. It's about 800 people. It's about 800 people. Yeah. Lots and lots of manual work, knowledge work, front office, back office. It's shocking how much touch points you have, how many interactions there are required.
Well, think about how that's manifests itself to the customer, right? Why do we all go to Amazon? Because it's quick, it's reliable, you can get something tomorrow if you need it. And so how do we recreate that experience in insurance? And the only way you do it is to drive automation with AI and ML. I mean, people doing it is not going to deliver that same experience.
Yeah. Another statistic, takes about 56 days for a life claim or a death claim to be paid out. Somebody is passed, right, and you owe them money, but it takes 56 days for that person to get paid. That's the kind of friction that, that's absolutely unnecessary, right? So you can absolutely remove that. Steve, what are some of the new initiatives that you're pursuing? There's a lot of talk of no code. Are you pursuing any of the no code movement? Are you
Is this where you want my opinion on low code, no code?
Please. It's controversial, but I would love to hear.
I think there is a lot of promise, and I'm a believer in business-led IT. I think it creates a level of creativity and innovation that is difficult if you leave it all to the technology organization. So as a CIO, part of my role is to figure out how to enable that in a way that's constructive for the overall company and has the right governance and not a way to stifle it. So I think there's a lot of promise in enabling non-technical resources to build solutions. But the caveat to that is there are very few applications in our world that sit standalone. They have to connect into something internally or in an external ecosystem. And usually that requires connecting, writing code, bringing in some technical expertise to architect and integrate. And so that's what I think I don't want to say the misconception I talk about with my business partners, but the recognition that we have a complex, in some cases, legacy environment. And so we're very supportive of low code, no code, but just recognizing that that integration work is key to actually make it work in our ecosystem, I think is important.
And Jen, you also have embraced some of these technologies. Tell us a little bit about what are you doing from a distribution perspective. You brought in some no-code tools as well. How is that changing? How is that partnership working for you as you're bringing these new products out?
So and I kind of go back to your last statement of how we engage with InsurTech. So we have Aflac Ventures, and we did a little Shark Tank experience, right? Where, to your point, where we kind of chunked it out. We said, here's our problems. We have these problems. So instead of having the InsurTechs come to us and say, this is what we can do for you, we're like, well, that doesn't work. We said, here's our problems. How can you solve them? And we ended up selecting Ushur, and they came to the table with a solution. And it wasn't any big problem. It was we couldn't communicate with our sales team. So they were out in front of a broker. They needed information quick, and they'd have to go log into their computer and look stuff up or pull out a piece of paper. So we're like, we need a way for them to access information at their fingertips when they need it. And so Ushur's like, well, we can do that. And so literally within a month, I think we had a prototype, we had it tested, and now they're using it, and now we're expanding, we're pushing messaging out that way. So it wasn't this huge problem, but it was definitely a problem. And now our sales team is more educated. They have the information they need when they need it. So, and we continue to grow. We were just talking yesterday about, okay, I have more problems for you to solve. What else can we do? So those partnerships become so essential, and you can pivot a lot faster than we can. And so when we only have to make this much change, and you're making this much change, it's much more tolerable and makes us much more efficient.
Great segue to ask a fellow entrepreneur. So what's the world of working in a bigger organization like Phineas mean from the nimbleness? Did you lose it? Did you influence that? How is that changing for you?
Yeah, so I think probably both of those a little bit, but the part around what both Jen and Steve said and what I love in terms of the opportunity ahead of us is, I think it's easy to forget that kind of we look at this, the cycle of innovation, that P&C started this transformation 15, 20 years ago, right? I mean, there weren't any real dominant claims players or full suite players, and then, Guidewire came out and really had some substantial growth, then Duck Creek, and then others, and we see, a lot of more maturing, and even there's still work to kind of get to a true cloud focus, right? And that's been still going. And benefits always lags behind P&C and other industries, and so, we certainly, one of the things going back to kind of what I said earlier that was attractive about Phineas is we looked at the market and all the folks that were out there that were doing policy administration, billing, claims, and absence, was that they had very similar tech stacks. Everything was in the cloud. Everything was AWS. That may seem like not a big deal in a lot of industries, but in our space, it's a huge deal, right? And there's still places on the planet where folks are still on premise because they're not comfortable with the cloud. And many carriers 5 years ago in the States were still kind of questioning, should we be in the cloud? I think that's changed mostly. So certainly, we have almost 1,300 employees globally, so it moves different than a 50-person startup, right? But we've got a massive R&D team and doing a lot of work around each of these areas in terms of how do you really take very key and specific use cases around some of the ones that we're talking about, where you can start learning to predict claims, where you can help figure out where you can get folks back to work earlier. Lots of really cool stuff as we're investing in both innovation and then also partnering with the right partners to figure out ways to take those use cases and really move quickly.
Let me check in with the audience to see if they have any specific questions. All you need to do is raise your hand and you'll get a mic. Can we get a microphone up here? Thank you.
You mentioned that when working with brokers, product will always be important, but you're sharing technology with them more and more, and that's delivering value. What examples or what technology have you shared with them that's been most impactful?
So I don't know that we're sharing technology as much as we're using similar technology, or we're engaging them on educating them on technology. So I find a lot of times when I talk to brokers, they know this much about Ben admin platforms or HCMs or how that all works. And that's going to be their livelihood going forward, is they need to be able to have that tech conversation. So it's giving them the information, it's bringing them into that conversation, it's education for the brokers. So I think it's more of that instead of sharing technology. I mean, we have a platform. If they need to use it, they can use it, and we'll share that technology with them, but it's enabling them to better serve their clients through technology.
So we've talked about using technologies such as AI to improve the user experience. So where we have complex insurance placement, some of which we talked about today, how do you get to the lemonade experience? So the 3 or 4 questions to quote and the minute to process a claim. How do we get there? We can use AI, we can use machine learning, we can use data and analytics to feed the process. But with the complex insurance that we transact, where we're dealing with brokers and it's very niche and specialist, how do we see ourselves getting there from your perspectives?
I don't have a good broker example. Do you?
I don't have a broker example, but I think you're right. It's simplification, it's through AI, it's automation. I think that the biggest challenge is the regulation, because you have to meet all of these boxes, check these boxes. So until we can, as an industry, I think, get the regulators to understand what we're trying to solve for, how we're solving for it, I think that's our biggest challenge, to get to that simplification from a life and health perspective.
I think as well, just to add to it as well, one of the problems I have in my business is it's that whole carrier legacy, in terms of we've always asked these questions in this order, with this level of complexity, and the state implications as well that you've referred to. That's
Less is more, less is more, less is more.
Yeah.
What can we cut? How can we get rid of it? Totally agree with you.
Yeah, and from my perspective, and cool accent, by the way, I didn't get that part of the Scottish. So, I think part of it from my perspective is also, again, understanding where we're at in just the transformation. And to Steve's point earlier, there's a ton of legacy systems, and carriers have troves and troves of data. And so there's lots of issues with that in terms of, are we all comfortable with, letting that data flow freely in PHI and PI and all that? But I think as we see more and more core systems getting replaced by true SaaS software and by systems that can allow for the interchange of data to be able to learn on models, and it starts to mature and the regulations start to catch up. And I think there's a lot of insurtechs that are driving that, a lot of companies that are, but there's just still a lot of siloed data that is stuck in systems that don't allow for that innovation. So even if you look at the last 6 years, there's been billions of dollars pumped into it, and a bunch of companies that started aren't going to make it or haven't made it, just because you spend so much time trying to just connect into existing systems. You can't innovate and focus on the really important user experience and the stuff on the front end. But I think that's changing, and personally, I think we're going to see that in the coming years substantially as more and more of those systems are replaced.
Let me ask you a provocative question, Steve. Huge battle between the CIO and the COO, at least as the world is evolving. Business versus IT, IT versus business. How do you see it?
I think eventually they're going to become symbolically one, right? Whether it's one role or it's already happening. I mean, the lines between business and technology is blurring. The C-suite is becoming more tech savvy. More of our operations are becoming digitized. So I think the CIO and your traditional infrastructure services are becoming more and more commoditized and delivered via the cloud. So I think the CIO becomes the COO of the future, to be honest with you. You're seeing a lot of CIOs either go down the path of chief digital officer, where they're also taking responsibility for digital P&Ls and new ways of working and driving new channels for revenue, or you see them shifting into that tech and ops role, where they're transitioning beyond just technology and into managing the operation. That's how I see it. So we're going to take them over eventually.
Any thoughts, Jen, on that? Business versus IT? Any thoughts on business versus IT?
Just one more, just on that. I said it earlier. Sorry, Jennifer.
You're good.
You have to. I used to worry about shadow IT all the time, and I finally said, I've got to embrace it and figure out how to live with it, and not make it not make it a risk to the enterprise, but actually garner the value out of it. And so I almost see my role sometimes as an orchestrator of those kinds of activities. And I wouldn't say I've figured out how to do it very well, or we have mechanisms to govern it very well, but we're trying to certainly not frown upon it as much, and to figure out how to bring it in a more embracing kind of way.
Thank you. You stalled long enough so I could come up with my answer. No, that's perfect. Business versus IT. So I'm clearly on the business side, not the IT side. And they never move fast enough, and they're not quick enough, and they're not innovative enough. But we have to work with them. So I think for us, the challenge is educating them on what we're trying to do, some ideas of how we can move forward, and then, Steve, to your point, we have to work together, and we have to sing Kumbaya and figure out how do we get to this end state. So to me, it's having that clear strategy, outlining the vision, and then saying, okay, how can we get there? I know this is our legacy system. I know this is the way we do things today, but there's this really cool startup over here that could help us at least go along faster. So it's engaging together, and really not this us versus them, but we're all in this together. We all want to have a successful company, and so it's driving forward in symbiotico, whatever, happily, yes.
And the flip side of that is I've told my staff in organizations for a while in technology, you need to understand the business, right? It's great you've got all these certifications, you can write code, you can architect, but do you really understand how we make money and what the pain points are? So I think we've got to come at it from both sides.
Yeah, I keep running into this challenge of capacity, right? Companies don't have capacity, particularly on the IT front, right? So Jason, how are you guys leveraging a partner ecosystem? Is that a way for you to bring more capacity for the carriers that you're trying to sell to? How are you solving that problem?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what Jen said is right on in terms of just there's always that fun battle between business and IT, and just having real clarity, and more often than not, that's one of the bigger challenges that I see on that front. But we're, my role and what we're doing at Fineos is exactly that, which is I see there's kind of two phases, at least amongst other things, to how this innovation will take place and kind of this transformation, which is, one, being able to work with carriers that are in a spot where they're really looking at being in the cloud, transforming their core systems, and then making sure that there's really mature APIs and connectivity through an ecosystem, because again, not any one entity is going to do everything. And so we look at that and say, here's what we're really good at, is if we're focused on having the most mature and compliant absence claims, billing, policy admin suite, then we can bring in partners that can be able to say, again, like in our partnership, we can work on claims communication, we can work on new business underwriting, intake, and we can start looking at areas where these partnerships complement it. I think one of the challenges is, and hopefully this doesn't offend any of our carrier friends here, but I think every carrier tends to feel as though they're unique, and that's the value proposition, versus looking at it and saying, if the industry is like, the Apple Store, the iPhone, and, then you build on top of that, and then you can differentiate on the experience and on everything else. And we just don't, because there's so much legacy in the industry and because regulations aren't really there, we don't have standards, which is the thing we talked about yesterday, it's just super difficult to get to the point where I think that the industry could really benefit from all the cool stuff we could actually do with the technology if we can get over that piece of it. And that's just an ongoing challenge. But I think that a big part of that is the ecosystem and building partnerships.
Well, and I found when we actually do sit down with IT and we all get to the, they don't want to work on this legacy stuff either. They'd much rather do this fun, the APIs. And so they see it as well. We just have to find a way to get there together. So
last topic, I think. We have less than 10 minutes. I think this is a topic of talent. It's crazy out there in terms of the market conditions for talent. How are you guys able to retain your people? How are you finding talent? What are you experiencing in terms of the Great Resignation? So it's an open topic. Anyone can jump in.
Everyone's looking around.
I think it's... Oh, go ahead.
All right. I think it comes down to flexibility and meeting people where they are, because you've got some people that would rather have flexibility over money, other people that have money over flexibility. Some want to come in the office, some don't. And so if you have the ability to meet them where they want to be, then you should try to do that. And not every company does, not every role can do that. But we have found that it's very important to engage. Diversity, equity, inclusion has been huge in just helping people understand what that means to us as a company, what that means to our brokers and our clients, and what we're doing to really advance in that realm. I've had several interviews lately where that's one of the first questions the person's asking, and usually these people are 25, 26, 27 years old. So they care about it, it's important. So it's not just about money, it's not just about work from home, it's the whole package. And so if we're gonna retain people, we have to invest in that. We have to invest in them, and we have to invest in that as a company.
So
I think the pandemic has moved flexibility up to the top of just right near comp, and it's a key component. I think the other thing is challenging and meaningful work, purposeful work. But I do think I am the first executive for Great West Life who doesn't sit in Canada, and it was a big reason I was able to take the role. And I think we're seeing that companies are no longer confined to a geography, and so we're fighting to retain our talent that was previously and still is not mobile, but now has a broader set of opportunities.
do you ever see going back into the office, any of your teams, full time?
I think Jennifer said certain roles, yes.
Yeah, I don't think it's a black and white thing. And not to make light at all of anything around the pandemic, because it's been brutal and lonely and difficult, and this is awesome to be back in person with everybody. But I think if there's a silver lining at all, I think one of the things it's forced us all to do is really think about what's important. And I've talked to tons and tons of people, myself included, that either were on the road a lot or traveling a lot, who said, I probably will never go back to the level of travel or whatnot. I love being closer to family or whatever the thing is they love to do, outdoors. And so I think what it's forcing all of us to do as leaders in our companies is to think about, as we recruit folks, there's so many choices, and so there's a new level of transparency and flexibility that's required. And I think the benefit is that you then start to attract people that want to be with you and want to believe in your vision, because otherwise they're not gonna, they have lots of options and lots of choices. And that's different where, and I think pre-COVID, it was a lot more like, oh man, I have been at this company or I have this company and I have to either go in and I'm not, and now it's completely flattened all of that. And a lot, in addition to everybody just rethinking, do I really want to do this? Do I want to be here? So I think the benefit is, I think when we get really good people, we get them because they believe in what we're doing and they want to be here, and then you can focus on that. And a lot of that comes down to, I think, selling the vision as well as being transparent.
So employee experience, like customer experience, is a super important consideration, right? I know for me, early on, I watched a lot of my seniors, right? People who have come before me 2-3 years into the company. I learned a lot watching them. So do you guys see this as a missed opportunity for young people graduating out of college who don't have the same opportunity to watch someone or work alongside or be a buddy or have a buddy Is that do you see that? I don't know. I mean, to me, that was such a big part of how I grew up.
I definitely think that there's something to that. You know, having a daughter who's in that situation right now and her only job has been remote, and she's missed some of that mentoring, some of that coaching, and just kind of being in the situation and learning how to adapt to it. But I also think that that's how they, especially the younger generation, I mean, that's how they've grown up. Like, they're fine being online, they're fine being on video, and they're finding other ways to engage and to network. And so is there a little bit of loss there? Yes, but I think it's just a different way of doing business. So it'd be nice if they could have a little bit of both.
Terrific. Any questions from the audience?
Thanks. Hi, guys. A lot of the focus I see on AI and machine learning is around like customer acquisition and then claims, and kind of playing off the pandemic aspect of it. Is revenue churn or policyholder churn and kind of surviving employment as the workforce becomes more transient. Are you finding any technologies or ways to engage this type of technology to help support kind of and reduce that churn risk as people bounce employer to employer, or and then are more apt to not maybe convert their Aflac product or something like that?
I'd say not yet. It's definitely on the strategy document as far as how do we do that? How do we retain those folks? How do we get them to keep our products as they move? A lot of that has to do with technology as well as the regulations, right? And so if it's a group product, can they convert it? Can they not? But then to me, it's back to that experience. How do we engage with them if we know they're leaving? And some of the platforms that we're working with are putting in processes to do that. And so we're paying close attention to how can we partner with them? How can we make sure that our product is part of that experience when they do move? And then it's the whole gig economy too. It's how do we hit those people that don't have an employer and they need their benefits some other way? So very hot topic.
Analogous to, not insurance specific, but in our U.S. business, we have a retirement services business where we have 401ks that we manage for 12 million Americans, and we see an opportunity to keep them in a retail space when they switch employers or retire. And so we knew that experience had to improve based on what we were offering. And so we went and partnered and then eventually bought a company in Silicon Valley, Personal Capital, that has a retail offering with a digital hybrid financial advisor experience. And we're taking that retail experience now and giving it to our DC or 401k participants and integrating that platform. So now when you leave an employer and they have a different retirement plan or you retire, you can stay with us and we can continue to manage your financial your financial portfolio. But it started with that experience, that experience, and we had to up our game on the on the corporate side.
If I may add, I think the employee experience is a key component of being able to retain your talent, right? So if you enable them to do meaningful work, things that make us human and differentiated, right? We bring empathy and cognitive capabilities as opposed to repeatedly doing the same thing. I see huge opportunities for us to enable our people to do better work. So that's I think how technologies like AI are making a difference. Any other questions? The last one or two questions. Any bets on whether it's Raiders or Tampa Bay again in the Super Bowl finals?
I thought you were going to ask about the Yankees or the Red Sox tonight. That's what I'm.
That got everybody
more
going.
Controversial one.
Okay, let's play some bets right now. Well, it's terrific that you are here with us this afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you to Steve, Jennifer, and Jason.